Why, hello there. Welcome to Smart Aspirations with Justin Huff. Sit back, chill out, and go on a journey around the world. Justin will discuss tales of hope, discovery, and general irreverence with some of the most dynamic personalities in the travel business. Remember, we do cool shit, and so can you.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Smart Aspirations with Justin Huff. Episode 5, this episode is very near and dear to my heart. It's not only is it the final episode of our initial launch, my guest this week is one of my oldest friends in the travel business. Jalsa Urubshurow is the CEO and founder of Nomadic Expeditions, which is Swaggy Swan Travels, my company's ground handler in Mongolia. Jalsa is also the CEO and founder of Three Camel Lodge, one of National Geographic's 50 unique lodges of the world, one of the founding members of the unique lodges of the world. And it's located right in the heart of the Gobi Desert, which is one of the main attractions, main highlights, if not the highlight of any trip to Mongolia. I asked Jalsa to come on the show because I think Mongolia is such an exotic and alluring destination that's still very much pure and innocent, unspoiled by mass tourism, relatively unknown to most people. And with this in mind, people, when they think of Mongolia, they aren't exactly sure where it is on a map geographically, from what I understand. And when I talk to people about Mongolia, and or the other part of it is that they remember Genghis Khan in high school history class having the largest empire in mankind. And fortunately, there's so much more to Mongolia than Genghis Khan. And what I feel is historical inaccuracies, having read a lot about Genghis. You'll definitely, I think, learn a lot more about Mongolia in today's show and why it's such a cool destination to experience for an intrepid and experience-seeking traveler wanting something different and new that not a lot of other people get to experience. Brief background on Jalsa. Jalsa grew up in New Jersey in one of 2 Mongolian American communities in the United States. His parents fled both the Stalinist purges and Hitler's concentration camps on their journey towards the United States, which actually wasn't the overall goal to get to at the end. And it's just an amazing story that Jalsa will get into in detail. Jalsa is a carpenter by trade. He worked his way up the old-fashioned way with hard work and a positive attitude. Dozens of years later, ended up establishing a company called Nomad Framing, which is one of the country's largest framing contractors and enjoys an incredible amount of success. Jalsa first went to Mongolia in the early 90s, and an awesome story. And this is right after the fall of communism. And it was then that he decided it was his first trip to his ancestral homeland. And then he decided to start a tourism company to promote everything that people he thought was so special about Mongolia and what really touched his heart, and he wanted to share that with the world. And it's very much a passion project, definitely not something that's being forced upon him to do. After Nomadic became an established operator in Mongolia over the years, Jalsa tapped into his carpentry and architectural expertise to establish the Three Camel Lodge. And that's enjoyed an enormous amount of success. Very, very cool experience. And including most recently it was named one of the top 10 hotels in Asia by Condé Nast Travelers. And that was a Reader's Choice Award. And Asia, by any means of the sense, is definitely not a small place. That's definitely saying a lot about Three Camel Lodge. In addition to this, and please forgive me, I'll have to read this verbatim. It's a lot. Jalsa has served as a judge for the Tourism for Tomorrow Awards for the WTTC, or the World Travel and Tourism Council. Was also named the world's travel specialist for Mongolia by Condé Nast Traveler, and is annually listed on Wendy Perrin's WOW list, which in the travel business is massive. He continues to support numerous conservation charities, including serving on the board for the Peregrine Fund, the Captain Planet Foundation, and he's also on the advisory board for National Geographic's Unique Lodges of the World, which he's a founding member. It's also definitely worth mentioning that Jalsa was awarded the Order of the Polar Star, which is by far the highest decoration that it can be awarded by from the Mongolian government to a foreign national. And that was for promoting and expanding upon bilateral relations between Mongolia and the United States. So with all this being said, Jalsa definitely knows his stuff. So if you like the content on the show, you want to hear more, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, give the video a like. If you want to listen to it on a podcast, we'll definitely include the links below. We're on Spotify and Apple Music, and all of that will be really easy to find for you in the description. So also, if you end up being inspired by Mongolia and want to plan a trip there, we'll include the link in the description on how to contact us to start planning your trip. And we'd love to we'd love to share the amazing experiences of Mongolia with you for sure. And so without further ado, here's Jalsa Urubshurow and myself. We hope you enjoy. Thanks so much. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 5 of Smart Aspirations with Justin Huff. As always, I'm your host, Justin Huff. Today, we've got a treat for you. We are honored to be joined by Mr. Jalsa Urubshurow, the CEO and founder of our ground handler in Mongolia, Nomadic Expeditions, as well as the CEO and founder of the spectacular 3 Camel Lodge in the Gobi Desert. Jalsa has been nice enough to take time out of his busy schedule to join us today from his home in New Jersey. Jalsa, first things first, you've got to get a reaction that's generalized from some people when you tell them, like, they meet you for the first time and you say, "Hi, I'm Jalsa and I run a travel company in Mongolia." What is the first thing that people associate Mongolia with?
Well, I've got to tell you, this has been it's 3 decades plus since Mongolia became a democracy that I've been promoting Mongolia as a travel destination. So our very first cards had our company's name on it, and on the back it had a map of Mongolia and the adjoining countries. So most people didn't know where Mongolia was,
Right.
So that might give you a clue. And having grown up in the first Mongolian community in America, but being an American, I was born here in the U.S. But I've got to tell you, there were sayings like, if someone was totally lost and off the grid, they used to say he's in outer Mongolia. So of course, promoting it as a destination over the last 30 years had some challenges.
Right. Because how can you dial in geography within like a 10-minute introduction to your business and what you do? That's really tough.
So, of course, the first reaction, by and large, 30 years ago, many people didn't know where Mongolia was. And of course, as far as I'm concerned, not enough know now, but much more. And hopefully we've played a part in making people more aware of what a wonderful place it is. So it's, of course I'm partial, but it's from what our client, and it's what our client, that's the reason for my commitment and why I've been involved. It's about my own personal exploration of my own identity, my ancestry. But really, when I see people who are Americans, the majority, but now Europeans, Brazilians, you name it, Australians, and to see this have grown and to hear people say it's one of the most amazing places they've been, that to me is really a reward, a true, it's fulfilling from having to have to tell them exactly where it was.
Sure.
And you know what? What's even more exciting is when you have to tell them where it is and they still go with you, and then they tell you it's one of the most amazing trips,
And that's the most rewarding part, of course. Well,
it's great.
With you were talking about your ancestry and your identity. Could you briefly tell us a little bit about your family's history and how they made it to the United States?
So, I come from a tribe of Mongolians, Western Mongols. My tribe is called Durbin.
Okay.
And if you trace back my ancestry, our core base was in what's now Xinjiang, the western part of northwestern China. But in historic maps, it's called Zungaria or Jungaria.
Okay.
But Zungar means left hand in Mongolian, which meant the Western Mongols and the Western tribes, which we are, the Durbits, the Oirats. The Oirats are the macro tribe, and Torgits, and there are various sub-tribes that are all Western tribes. So in the 1600s, from what's now Xinjiang, the Urumqi area, close to 400,000 Mongols migrated over 2,000 miles with their herds, looking for a better existence, all the way to the middle of Russia where the Volga River meets the Caspian Sea, and settled there.
All right.
This is over 400 years ago. And they settled there And they came to be known as the Kalmyks because after about 100 years, half of them wanted to go back. During the time of Catherine the Great, 100 years later, in 1720 or so, nearly 200,000 tried to go all the way back. Many of them perished. The majority perished on the way. The ones left behind came to be known as Kalmyks, Kalmyk Mongolians. So Kalmykia became part of the 18 autonomous regions of the former Soviet Union. So that's where my parents came from. And, after the Russian Revolution, 1917, during that period of time, many of them, and these are poor people living a pastoral nomadic existence with their herds and their sheep and livestock.
In complete contrast with Soviet Russia.
Exactly. And they were far from Moscow, and they were in this beautiful region. But when I say beautiful region, it was very steppe-like, desert-like, Gobi-like in some areas. The capital is named Elista. The Mongolian word for that is sand. The translation is sand.
Okay.
So it was not prime real estate by any means.
Yeah.
But during the after the Communist Revolution, some of them started to drift westward because they didn't embrace the philosophies and the impact of communism. Then, of course, it became more severe. But during World War II, or prior to World War II, many of them migrated westward to other countries that became Eastern European, other Soviet satellites. But so during the Second World War, many of them ended up in displaced persons camps in Germany. My parents literally fled from fled from Stalin into Hitler's arms and ended up in these camps. Two of my brothers actually passed away in camps in Germany post-World War. But fortunately, the camps they were in were liberated by the Allies. And, the Yalta Conference, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt made a pact where all of the Eastern European or Soviet Union subjects, military, whether they were POWs or citizens, were repatriated. And we know now, history tells us that Stalin essentially killed probably up to 60 to 70 million of his own people. 580 or so Kalmyk Mongolians were in these camps, and they were liberated by the Allies, the region they were in. And fortunately, Leo Tolstoy's daughter, who was living in the U.S., who was an anti-communist but a staunch nationalist, knew that my ancestors in history, that Kalmyks, were great horsemen, the Mongols, and they actually fought with the Tsars against Napoleon. So she sponsored them. And of course, after the war with Korea and Japan, there were two waves that in 51 and 52, and even a couple of relatives of mine testified before a congressional hearing, speaking fluent Russian, because there was a ban on immigration of Asians after the war with Japan and the Korean War.
Right.
So in 51, they testified before a congressional hearing because they were looking to be exempted from this Immigration Act that prevented Asians from coming to the U.S. Speaking fluent Russian, saying "Я не китайский, я не японский, я по-русски." So we're speaking fluent Russian after 400 years, saying we're not Asian, we're not Chinese, we're not Japanese, we're Russians. And so they were giving a special exemption. My father's green card, and he's my father, and my mother said Caucasian. So they were treated as Russians.
Oh my God. Между прочим, Jalsa, вы говорите по-русски очень хорошо.
Ой, очень хорошо, да. Я понимаю немножко, но не умею говорить.
I think we're going to subtitle that for the audience.
So I say I speak, I understand a little bit, but I don't speak it at all. But of course, through osmosis, I grew up in this community that Leo Tolstoy's daughter in the middle of New Jersey sponsored for these Mongols come after in 1951 and 50. The largest group came in 52.
That's wild.
I was born there in 55. So, but it was also the location for the first Buddhist temple in America, first Lamas Buddhist monastery in America. And that was kind of our core with a bunch of Russian people living there already in the middle of New Jersey, about 40 some odd miles from Manhattan.
That is absolutely unbelievable.
So, and Mongolian was my first language. So I grew up with of course, Mongolian. My father, who passed away when I was 14, telling me Mongolian fairy tales, making me speak Mongolian. My English was not perfected till I entered the public educational system. And so that's my ancestry, and that's where my curiosity about my ancestry and my roots started.
Well, it's honestly, I know, coming from the Stalinist purges into the concentration camps in Germany, that's going out of the frying pan and into the fire, pretty much literally. And just being so proud of the fortitude that it took to make it there. I'm sure your father and your mother and everybody that was in the community were very, very proud to be American and to embrace this brand new lifestyle.
Without a doubt. I mean, the U.S. is a symbol of freedom, and obviously it is a diverse country. It is truly a melting pot.
Sure.
And so that's what makes our country strong, I believe, these different threads that weave together to create a truly strong fabric.
Absolutely.
And so that's something I think that's one of our innate strengths, and I think it's something we have to preserve. And
I completely agree with you on that point, for sure. Taking a step back a little bit to Mongolia as itself as a destination, and as you hear stories about your ancestral homeland from your parents and everything, and then eventually growing to what you are now, if you wanted to tell people a little bit about Mongolia by itself, once people understand the geography behind it, as a destination, what are some of the key regions that you would want to talk about to people once they start listening to you about the destination?
It's key regions. Mongolia is, people may have some assumptions. They think about Mongolia as some kind of massive desert, but it's comprised of, it's so diverse. And Mongolia is a large, massive land. And of course, Genghis Khan, or known in the West as Genghis Khan, is he established the largest contiguous empire in the history of the world. But Mongolia's political borders now, Mongolia proper, is which was the first Soviet satellite in 1921, the second communist country in the world after Russia.
Okay.
It became the Mongolian People's Republic. But it's almost half the length of the U.S. It's over 1,400 miles long, and close to approximately 700 and change north to south at its widest point. So here you have this large mass of land with 3 million people. And it encompasses 3 major ecosystems. In the north, you have a continuation of the largest forest in the world, the taiga.
Right.
This large forest from Siberia that extends into the upper, I'd say, 15 to 20% of the northern border of Mongolia.
Okay.
But then you go to the famous Gobi Desert. It's this unique desert, one of the northernmost deserts in the world. And it's a semi-arid desert. It's rich in different kinds of plant life. It's not this arid desert like you think of, just sand dunes. In fact, I think less than 10% to 12% of the desert itself is covered with sand dunes or sand formations.
Completely different.
So it is different. It's more of the famous steppe we talk about or hear about, these rolling grasslands and plains and wide open spaces like you wouldn't believe. Then, of course, you have in the north where we have the taiga forest, you also have, Mongolia has 4 major mountain ranges, and all the way in the west where 4 countries converge. The westernmost province of Mongolia, Bayan Ulgi, is where Kazakhstan, it's probably less than 40 miles from the Mongolian border, but to the right is Russia and to the left is China. So Mongolia, China, Russia all converge there at the westernmost province of Mongolia.
Yeah. And
there you have the tallest peaks, the Altai Mountains, that stretch in from the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan, all the way down to the Gobi Desert, and then they turn eastward, and they become the Gobi Altai Mountains.
Okay.
So you've got these, and then of course you have the east, the largest unfenced grasslands left on Earth. People think of the Serengeti in Africa, and we know it's an amazing grasslands. And we know about the migration, which is roughly about 40,000 square kilometers of grasslands. The Mongolian steppe in the east is about 260,000 square kilometers of unfenced grasslands, rolling plains and grasses. And also it's home to the largest herds of mammals, hoofed mammals, ungulates in the world, the white-tailed gazelle, which is an antelope, part of the antelope family. And the herds travel in mass groups. BBC and Discovery Channel did Planet Earth, and one of the segments is deserts. And there's a scene from a helicopter where they filmed a herd of over 200,000 white-tailed gazelle together.
200,000? Okay.
Which is just unbelievable. It's hard to depict, and certainly it's hard to film even from a helicopter.
Sure,
you can't get the whole herd. But you think about the famous migration from water after the rains in Africa, and we'll hear about a million wildebeest, but it's over a course of the 7 to 9 days, right? And they're migrating. but to have this massive herd together, or 250,000 or 200,000 gazelle, just it's
that is ridiculous.
We've made camp there, and we've done wilderness camps at sunset, looking out on the plains, and you're looking at the horizon, and then you realize as the sun is setting, and you look at the whole horizon, it's undulating in massive herds. So I've seen you can't capture it. It's in these wide open spaces. There's an old saying would say that only in wide open spaces do you truly have vision.
Oh my God, I love that.
So.
Hey, and I know a lot of our listeners and viewers have they've been to Africa and they've seen the Serengeti. And if you have watched the National Geographic films of all of the wildebeest crossing the Masai Mara River or the Talek River somewhere in the Serengeti Masai Mara ecosystem, those crossings can number anywhere from about 2,000 to 3,000. And so to kind of compare that to what's going on in the eastern steppes of Mongolia, that's completely different. Just the numbers are dwarfed. So you've definitely got a wildlife phenomenon that not a lot of people know about there.
It's really difficult to describe because I've done overland safari in eastern Mongolia, where we have tented camps, or we'll set up our luxury attached ensuite geras, we call them, which are yurts, Western terms.
Yes, yeah.
So the famous Mongolian yurt. But we'll set them up in these remote places. But when we're driving overland, I remember driving. You'll uncover Phragmites, this goldenrod type of long reed plant flower. You'll get patches of them hundreds of yards, maybe long. And I remember us slowly going through with our 4-wheel drive vehicles through this Phragmites, and we went on for almost 2 hours.
Yeah. And
when we broke through, there was a herd of probably 20 or 30,000 gazelle just leaping in front of us. It was, insane. And you can still have this. Mongolia's total population is 3 million, and 1.6 live in the capital. Mm-hmm. So when you get out to the countryside, because also the nomadic way of life. When I say nomadic, pure nomadic, the scientific term, they're in search of game, and they're not. But this is nomadic pastoralism, where they raise their livestock and they move their geras or their yurts 3 or 4 times a year in winter valleys for protection from the winds and the weather, then back to their spring and summer pastures for grazing. So they live, and that's their possessions. They'll pack them up and they'll leave. In modern times you'll see trucks and things, but if things get tight and cost of gasoline, they'll move to their traditional pasture lands with horses and camels.
They'll keep going. Well, and
so up to 30% of the population still lives a pastoral nomadic existence,
and that is something that is just going on naturally. It's so difficult to experience this type of authentic culture that all throughout the world. And I would imagine that as you're exploring these different places, you're not going to see a whole hell of a lot of tourists, are you, in mass?
Oh, certainly it's grown, but when you think about places like Italy, 80 million or 200 million visitors a year, or Mexico, 140 million at their peak, and China, double that possibly. Mongolia being as vast as it is, and the nature of that lifestyle, when you get out of the capital, the urban area where more than half the population lives, you travel even an hour outside of the capital and you're out in the countryside and you see this. So they're so social distancing is not the issue. It's, vast, wide open spaces. And there are some popular spots, but, imagine being able to go at sunset in the Gobi Desert. And I didn't talk about the Gobi before I spoke, because I know we'll get to the Gobi.
We'll get into it for sure.
We spoke about the eastern grasslands, and we spoke about the beautiful lakes and rivers. In fact, in the north, the taiga, we have Lake Hovsgol. It's the second largest lake in Mongolia. It's about 90 miles from the Russian border. And above that, less than 100 miles, is Lake Baikal.
Right.
Lake Baikal is the largest freshwater lake in the world. It holds 20% of all freshwater. And it's fed by Mongolian rivers flowing northwards. So Lake Hovsgol is this beautiful lake. It's considered an aquatic rainforest by many. And of course, it's become more popular because it's so rich, the phosphate content, the mountains surrounding it. Of course, the winters are quite cold, so the algae build up, and so it's quite crystal clear. Well, we used to kayak on this lake and just dip our cups into the water, and you can see for 90 feet,
90 feet straight down.
And you can see rocks at the bottom of the lake until you get deeper. It's also one of the deepest lakes in the world. It's about 500 feet, 400 and change to the bottom, and maybe deeper in some places. But just imagine seeing this beautiful lake, fed by these rivers. And, these are the things that we have to protect and cherish. Baikal has its issues environmentally with logging and pulp and things like that. But it's so here the north of Mongolia has these beautiful rivers and lakes. Some of the rivers, and of course we have another fisherman will say it's a fisherman's story, but most avid fishermen know about the taimen. The taimen is a salmonid. It's an Arctic whitefish. It's the largest species of trout in the world.
Okay.
And,
that's cool.
And of course, like all species, they're under duress, and the fish population has been diminished. Not so much necessarily by sport fishing, but environmentally and all these issues. But taimen, if you look it up, Taimen, just look up taimen photos, Google that, you'll see. Telling a fisherman it's quite hard for them to believe, but the record is over 2 meters long, so that's close to 70 feet or so.
That's huge.
And so taimen are amazing, and of course that's another amazing aspect of Mongolia. And they live in rivers only, freshwater rivers, so they're not in this huge lake that I talked about.
Okay. So you've got these beautiful Altai mountains to the west. You've got Hovsgol up in the north. You've got these incredible endless eastern steppes filled with these undulating, these white-tailed gazelles, and you've got obviously the massive Gobi in the north. Gobi in the south. Excuse me. Talking about the Gobi itself, that's such a catchment name, and we briefly touched on the misconceptions of it being like a full sand desert. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you can see snow leopard in the Gobi. Is that correct?
There are some major concentrations of snow leopards in the Gobi. And, scientists, biologists, the estimates are, we work with a variety of conservation organizations.
Okay.
The Snow Leopard Trust, Snow Leopard Conservancy are organizations we support and also applaud their efforts, and World Wildlife Fund, of course. But they've come to learn in recent years that there are some concentrations in the Gobi, and of course there are some in the western Altai mountain region. But in the Gobi, one of the most recently designated highly protected areas is Tosin.
Okay.
And they've estimated there's a concentration of snow leopards within 100-kilometer radius of up to 60, they think,
60
adults.
snow leopards. Oh, wow.
So in this one region.
Yeah.
So the snow leopard is one of the most elusive and most endangered cats in the world. The estimates are from collectively, when you look at all the data, anywhere from 3,500 to 6,000 snow leopards left on Earth. Mm-hmm. So the efforts, and they're the most elusive, so spotting them is not an easy thing.
Sure.
But again, it's a different experience than your safari with concessions where they are basically protected, which are valid as well. Mm-hmm. Zoo is another theory, and then of course having them in their natural habitat and being able to protect them from poachers and all the other,
of course,
dangers there are. But in Mongolia, that's still the same thing, and especially when you have this large nomadic pastoral population that's raising goats and sheep. If things are tough, snow leopards will. But again, if the environment is protected and their natural game of argali, the largest bighorn sheep in the world, or ibex, the sweeping horned goat.
Right.
So when they have natural game that they can pursue, then the population is more stable.
Okay. Wow.
And they don't have to poach. They don't have to attack domesticated herds, though they do from time to time. And that's another thing. Once, even though the snow leopard is officially protected by law.
I mean, have there already been? Is it a regular occurrence? Is it extremely rare for a guest to maybe encounter one when they're staying in the Gobi?
It's extremely rare, but because of our work with WWF and various conservation organizations, we've actually hosted several trips in search of the snow leopard, which were done for philanthropic reasons. We've helped support, given WWF support in WWF Mongolia in setting up camera traps in the western region of Mongolia. And we've also sponsored the trip where we had our clients go along with our guides to go visit. We helped them set up radio collars as well.
Okay.
And so they were able, so actually two of our clients, I think it was several years ago, 3 years ago, maybe longer, where they went out with our WWF biologists in Mongolia, and they tracked, they tracked with the radio collars to them, but they also saw 2 other snow leopards that were not collared and that were in the wild.
Okay.
And more recently in the Gobi, there's a beautiful rock valley that's about now 2 hours from our lodge, an hour and a half to 2 hours overland. These beautiful valleys, and it's a stone canyon, a basalt gorge. And 2 of our clients, this is definitely 3 years ago, we're driving through with our guide en route to the longest stretch of sand dunes in the Gobi, Hungry Nels. And they said, "What's that?" And there was a snow leopard drinking out of a spring. So it is their habitat. We used to find tracks before, and I went back actually to look at the tracks there.
Oh, cool.
So the locals told us there were 2 adults and a few cubs there. So, excuse me, forgive me.
No worries.
But no, it's amazing. But that is, I mean, I've been through that valley, I mean, literally dozens and dozens of times, and I haven't seen one. And I was supposed to go on this trip I designed with one of our top guides with WWF, because we've been a supporter. And one thing led to another. I broke an ankle.
Oh my gosh!
Slipping on some ice in Mongolia, and so I didn't get
At least
to go.
there's a good story behind it, for sure.
Well, there's always a story, but no, it is not the same experiences. But again, if you go to the eastern grasslands, the white-tailed gazelle, and they used to be prevalent in the Gobi Desert as well. We would see herds of hundreds, thousands, and then they disappeared. And what they found, biologists, Kirk Olson, who is one of the leading authorities on white-tailed gazelle in the world, he's worked with the Smithsonian, also he's worked with the Wildlife Conservation Society. He actually helped the BBC and Discovery Channel photographers when they were in the helicopter and they uncovered this herd. So he's studied their migration for well over a dozen years. I told Kirk he speaks gazelle. But,
speaks gazelle speak.
But so he's helped them, amongst other researchers, determine that the white-tailed gazelle of Mongolia is actually nomadic. It doesn't have these migratory patterns that are totally predictable.
It's not predictable, so that's
like
why the Serengeti. Okay.
Probably a decade in the Gobi, I didn't see any. Then we saw a group of like 4 or 5, and a few pairs by themselves, because in the Gobi, it depends on rainfall, grasses. Yeah. And so obviously grazing is important. You know?
Sure. It had to take taking so long to understand these migrational patterns and exploring these valleys and establishing tourism from something that was essentially in its pre-primitive stage. I'd imagine that took some time, and I know that Mongolia became a democracy in the early 90s. Could you kind of trace us back to your first visit to Mongolia, and then how you founded Nomadic Expeditions and kind of where it became from? Take us from the first steps until where it became today.
It's going back, but Mongolia did become a democracy in a peaceful revolution in 1990.
Okay.
So after being the second communist country in the world and essentially the first Soviet satellite for 70 years, the revolution came. But I grew up in this Mongolian community. It was the really only large or concentration of any significance, and that was about 200 of the 580 Mongolians. About half, a little less than half, settled in Philadelphia. And the others were in our community and region in New Jersey, Monmouth County, New Jersey. And so, of course, I grew up with my innate curiosity and desire to learn more and speaking Mongolian, the Western dialect. But we had contact. The only presence Mongolia had in any ethnic Mongolians really significant was the mission to the United Nations in New York, which was allowed because the UN was obviously the United Nations, and so even communist countries were allowed to have a mission to the UN, but restricted. This is the Cold War period, but even during that time, some of my relatives, my uncle, people had reached out and became acquainted with the ambassador to the United Nations from Mongolia. Okay. And this is going back, that mission was established, I believe, in 1966. So during the 70s, I was a young carpenter So as I was saying, obviously we had this connection to Mongolia and this desire to meet the few Mongolians. And so I remember when I was a young carpenter, and that's my other business. I was very fortunate after hard work, and growing up from the bottom up. But I remember I got a secondhand van at some point working for my uncle, my mother's brother, who became friends with the ambassador. We'd had dinner with the Mongolian ambassador to the UN.
That's awesome.
And so one I just had it a week or so. I think it might have cost me $700 or $800. It was a major investment for me.
Sure.
I was a young carpenter. And he said, look, I need to borrow your van. And I said, sorry, you can't borrow my new van, my new 20-year-old van. But I said, what do you need? I'll help you. And of course, I used to work in summers then. I was in school at the time. I think, I was still in school. And he wanted to borrow the van. I said, I'll help you. And I worked 6 days a week. In the summers, you had to work as much as you could. But Sunday, he said, all right, be at my house at 7 o'clock in the morning or something like that on Sunday morning. And so we're in this community I grew up in, this suburban community with all Russians and Mongolians, no two houses alike, no sewer, no water. I had an outhouse in my backyard when I was
my gosh.
And so literally dirt roads. So I show up at my uncle's house and there's a sheep tied up in the lawn. And I said, what are we doing? He said, we got to go to New York City. I said, okay. We shoved the sheep in the back of the van. And I'll never forget, because apparently my uncle had a conversation with the Mongolian ambassador. And, they've been in, this is in the 70s. Uh-huh. Yeah, like mid 70s, 70. I think I was 19 or 20. Oh, anyway, so I pull up, we load the sheep up, and he had the conversation with the ambassador, and he had mentioned how they hadn't had fresh mutton or meat in a long time, and everything's packaged off the shelves.
Yeah.
And so at that time, the Mongolians in the summer months, they would go on the weekends to the Russians had a Russian compound.
Yeah.
Their vacation home or whatever in summer in
like a dacha on steroids, so to speak.
In Long Island. But they gave the Mongolians like a few rooms in this huge mansion kind of place. Mm-hmm. And so their plan was that they would have a barbecue and they would slaughter a live, a sheep. And so here we are. I'll never forget this. We're going through the Lincoln Tunnel with the sheep in the back of the van going, bad. And at that time you paid the toll collector. And he was like looking at me. I said, don't ask. So I remember we pulled in East 77th Street, which is where the mission still is, this 6-story townhouse right next to Central Park. And here it was like, by that time it was 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, because, the reason they were able to come visit my uncle was because our community was like 42 miles from Manhattan.
Yeah.
And in communist countries were not allowed from the Cold War period on to go outside of the 50-mile radius of the General Assembly building.
Oh, so you're right across the river from the UN. There you go.
Exactly. 42 miles to our community.
Works perfectly.
From the General Assembly building. But of course, all things had to be reported, when they traveled or whatever. But so here we are driving through there. And then we get to East 77th Street and we pull in. It's a one-way street going towards the park. And we pull in. It's like early in the morning on Sunday. And here, 3 Mongolian guys. The ambassador came out, rolled up his sleeves. He was ecstatic. And there's this black Cadillac or something, big with diplomatic plates. And the 3 men are shoving the sheep. We're shoving the sheep into the back seat of this black Cadillac. And I'm going to tell you, the windows open up. People are looking out the window. You could have cried murder on a Sunday morning at 8:30 and nobody would do any. And next thing you know, one-way street, but 2 cop cars pulled in. And I can't use the exact language, but the police officer came up to me, and here's my uncle whose English was, so and same as the Mongolian ambassadors with thick Russian accents. But anyway, the cop comes up to me and he says, what the is going on here?
Yeah.
And I said to him, oh, well, that's my uncle, and that's the ambassador to the United Nations for Mongolia. And the sheep is a gift. And he goes, get out of here.
You gotta be kidding me.
He used a few other choice words.
Sure.
Anyway, so the ambassador went in and got his credentials. I was saying, look, there's diplomatic plates. And when he saw the credentials and submission to the UN, and he said, I won't tell you what he said then either, but he said, get out of here. So that was one of my memories. That's how the quest for contact with Mongolia, all this, it was ingrained in me from childhood, you know.
It's like a Mongolian sheep motorcade. I'm visualizing here. That's
so
great.
that, you know, fast forward, you asked how this all started. So 1990, obviously I maintained contact, my uncle did, with various Mongolians who were officially there for the government. But then it became a democracy in 1990. And post-democracy, after their peaceful revolution, they had opened the new embassy, and I'd actually helped them look for their ambassador's residence, different properties, because I've been involved in construction and real estate and whatnot down in Washington. They ended up with a property in Potomac for the ambassador's residence, and then their embassy building is in Georgetown, right across from the Four Seasons. But anyway, this delegation had come of members of parliament led by a senior member, and they were driving from the mission to the UN to Washington.
Okay.
And of course, we're in New Jersey, and I heard about it, and I invited them to our community, to one of our temples. And by that time, we had 3 different Buddhist temples in Howell Township. So they came to this place called Ol Nagazar, which means everyone's land. And we had a party for them with Mongolian dumplings, one of my favorites, national dish.
Of course.
And so these members of parliament, and they knowing our tribe left Mongolia, or northwestern China now, Xinjiang, which was part of the Mongol Empire, and migrated to Russia over 2,000 miles, 400 years before. And I was speaking to them in Mongolian, and we'd been in the U.S. for over 50 years, you know. And so they were amazed, and so they invited me. Well, the leader was an elder member of parliament, Yambasudin. Prior to my arrival in Mongolia in September of 1990, he was picked prime minister, because it's a bicameral political system. So the president is elected by the public by popular
vote. Okay.
And so he's elected by popular vote, and so are the individual members of parliament. But the prime minister is then selected by the members of parliament. And so Yambasudin is the guy who invited me, the leader of the delegation. And when I arrived to Mongolia in 1990, of course, they treated me, you know, great. I was in the ex-Choibalsan, one of the other political leaders of Mongolia's like mansion in the middle of the capital on the main Fifth Avenue, Engpai in Narumdo. And so I was there for a few days alone in this, you know, I'd go down for breakfast and there was this 60-foot dining table with, you know, silverware that had like a hammer and sickle and things on it. And 2 soldiers, like, and I would ask in Mongolian, Indigo, can I get some eggs or whatever? So finally I called the chief of staff and said, I have to get to the countryside. And that was what was monumental. And the state-run tourism organization was my host. You know, everything was state-owned in the communist period. This is 1990. The transition was just starting. And so I got out to the countryside, and it was just amazing. I spent time with a horse wrangler, and it was just amazing. A couple of nights in a tent and a couple of geta camps that they had, the Russian style. I saw this way of life, and I saw these vast, wide open spaces, blue skies, and nomadic families just welcoming you, the level of hospitality. It was just amazing. So
was there when I came back to the capital, sorry, Jalsa. Was there an exact moment when you were in the countryside that inspired you to say, okay, I'm going to try tourism?
Well, that wasn't actually, I knew I was coming back. This is my first trip. My mother, I actually sent my mother in 1987 with my aunt. We used to call them Laverne and Shirley. and they actually went to Xinjiang, and where you know, Zungar I told about, which is now Xinjiang, and Urumqi, and they were met by a member of the Chinese parliament and Politburo, and he was the political leader of that area, though they were a minority. He was a Turgan, another Western Mongol, speaking the same dialect as us. So my mom sent me videos. But when she went there, then she went back to Hohhot, the capital of Inner Mongolia, took a train into Mongolia. And when she got to Ulaanbaatar, it was a totally different experience. This gentleman who met them in Inner Mongolia, or not in our region, our ancestral region, he took them out to the countryside, bought them traditional bells, the Mongolian costumes, and had a cookout, and they were slept in geras or yurts, and it was just amazing. When they got to Mongolia in 87, here's 2 older ladies speaking fluent Russian and English and Mongolian, Western Mongolian, with U.S. passports. She said, they think I'm a spy. I got through.
I was going to say, they think you're a spy.
So it was a totally different environment. But when I went in 1990, it was just amazing. But then when I came back to the capital from seeing the countryside, camping and staying in camps and yurts, the prime minister asked me to promote travel to Mongolia because the West, they had less than 100 U.S. passports as tourists.
Less than 100.
So there were a few pioneers in the West that had done things there, like Alex Harris from General Tours. And so when I got there, when they asked me this, less than 100 U.S. passports as tourists, because they had scientific and educational programs, exchanges with Eastern European countries and with fewer Americans. The American Museum of Natural History has been doing paleontological trips from 1923 when its director, Roy Chapman Andrews, the famous archaeologist, did a motor vehicle, the first motor vehicle expedition, scientific expedition in 6 or 7 Dodge trucks and cars and looking for the origins of man. So it's a famous thing. That's how he coined the term flaming cliffs in the Gobi, where he looked for the remnants of man because that was his theory that man originated in Asia, in Central Asia. So after driving from Beijing over 200 miles north across the Mongolian border and 200 miles north, he didn't find any remnants of man, but he found over 2,000 specimens of different plants and animals. On the return to Beijing, getting closer to the Chinese border, he was heading back, and the sun was setting, and he saw this massive sand formation of cliffs, and they became brighter orange as the sunset, similar to Sedona, other places. And he called it the Flaming Cliffs and made camp at this little knoll away from the cliffs. Then he moved this campsite into the middle of the cliffs the next day. And the next morning, one of his members of Mother Nature called, went outside, and almost literally stumbled upon the first nest of dinosaur eggs in the world.
That's how the dinosaur eggs were found.
But he also coined, this is called Bayanzag by the Mongolians, which means rich saxel. The saxel tree is an amazing thing. At that time, there was a saxel forest there.
Okay.
Huge. The saxel is a unique tree that grows in the desert with a huge root system. And it survives on the sides of these cliffs of sand, and it can retain water in its roots. It also has this other plant that grows on its roots. And forgive me, I forgot the botanical term.
Oh, absolutely no judgment. I don't think anybody's gonna.
But this plant grows.
The Latin name.
But it grows underground on its roots, and it's a symbiotic relationship where this plant will absorb, when there's water, absorb the water from the roots of the saxel.
Okay.
And it's this gnarly tree, but they found this is one of the hardest woods in the world. If you take a piece of saxel and drop it in a bucket of water, it'll sink.
No joke.
In fact, in the 30s, the Russians decided that because the steam engine was becoming popular in Russia in the 30s. So I'm not sure of the exact. Fulton was a little earlier than that, but anyway.
Again, no judgment.
They literally cut down probably 30 or 40,000 hectares of saxel trees, which takes hundreds of years to grow.
To grow back,
12, 14, 15 feet high, and it's this gnarly. Because they thought it would be a replacement for coal. So obviously that didn't pan out, and they denuded a lot of the forests. Mongolia had some of the richest, largest saxel forests in Central Asia. That's the only place that really grows in Central Asia in any kind of abundance. But so Roy Chapman Andrews, that was when he discovered this. But the American Museum of Natural History, 70 years later, they discovered the famous embryo, a cross section of the same eggs that were in the nest that Andrews discovered in 1923. So it's amazing, paleontological thought. So Mike Novacek, Mark Norell, the provost and the director of paleontology, dear friends, they've been an ongoing, it's the longest running expedition in any country by the American Museum of Natural History, scientists.
Oh, crazy.
And paleontologists. Yeah. They've been there, I think it's going to be 32 years, every year continuously, every summer, and discovering major finds. So it's an amazing thing.
And now, clients, if the clients have a keen interest in paleontology, archaeology, dinosaurs, natural history, can they get involved with that?
Well, we've done many paleontological expeditions or combined them with our visitors. We've done trips with the board of directors and donors for the American Museum by helicopter to meet them in their dig sites. But we always do it in conjunction with the Academy of Sciences and the Mongolian Paleontological Association. So we get permits. And so we usually, for our clients, we bring along a paleontologist We'll show them and dig. It's an official dig. And of course, because of poaching of dinosaur fossils, because they've become quite valuable, we always camouflage. And people are watching us with binoculars, the poachers, and they want to see where we're digging because they know how we operate, which always with paleontologists. So we'll do fake digs if we're being observed, and we'll try to camouflage their sites and we rebury them. But many of our finds have been returned to the academy in the capital, and we plaster cast them and preserve them. But they don't have the funding to properly restore all of these fossils. So they have some of our fossils that we've in joint expeditions uncovered in the early 90s still that are jacketed and plastered. But I remember I arranged for Dr. Philip Curry, he was at the time he was with the Royal Tyrrell Museum from Heller, Canada, to meet Bob Bacher, who was with the Tate Museum in the University of Wyoming. So I had a Canadian and Canadian and an American paleontological groups come and converge at the Flaming Cliffs, and then we went to other sites. And one of our guides at the time, Sherilyn Brandt, first trip to Mongolia, Bob Bacher was giving her, she was with the American group, and then we had Dr. Phil Curry with the Canadian group and another guide. But Sherilyn got to the Gobi, and Bob Bacher had given them a little precursor on how you identify fossils, and you can tell if it's fossil bone or if it's just more modern contemporary bone. You pick up a certain type of fossil and you touch it to your tongue. If it sticks like glue, it is a fossil.
Okay.
If it's stone or a different, more modern bone, it'll just fall off. So, but anyway, Sherilyn got out of the Russian Jeep at the time. This is in the 90s, in the early 90s. And she reached out, she picked up this thing, and Bob Bacher grabbed it and held it for the next 6 days under his sleeping bag or whatever. Right. They were at remote camps. And it turned out to be the first juvenile hadrosaur, or a species, a type of a duckbill, but it was a juvenile fossil. And so I was joking because they literally first discovery of a juvenile hadrosaur in the Gobi. So I was kidding around and saying they should name it Nomadicus, whatever, when they give it to
Nomadicus.
But no. So that's been a part of it. Any of the trips we do, we want, if you're interested in astronomy or botany or culture, we work with the Academy of Sciences, and we have the best available talent. And we also have Western, like Dr. Kirk Olson about gazelles, I mentioned.
Right.
Amazing biologist he's worked with the Wildlife Conservation Society and the Smithsonian. So we try to add that level of content as far as, and if they have a particular interest in whatever the range is, we try to pair them with Mongolian experts so they can get that kind of insight into it, because they're amazing. We even have Dr. Dolma, who's an astrophysicist from the Academy of Sciences. Okay. Would give all of our clients a 3D presentation on the creation of the solar system with 3D glasses on. That's cool. And then we'd go outside on top of the rock outcropping behind our lodge and look at the night skies of Mongolia. And
zero light pollution, completely.
There's no reflected or refracted light.
Sure.
And I mean, just billions of stars. But when you have an astrophysicist after that presentation, then going out with her telescope with the laser pointer, it's a little different than, there are other countries you go with a guide who's got his laser pointer.
He's got a laser pointer, yeah. Speaking from experience, I can tell you that's a lot more value added. Now, you mentioned your specific interests. I want to talk about culture quickly. If I'm not mistaken, I know I'm not mistaken in this regard. I know you well enough by now. You started culture enthusiasts. You are involved and created the Golden Eagle Festival in Western Mongolia. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how it was, and where you got the idea from it and how it's grown over time?
So, though we sent clients to the West, I've been in every province of Mongolia, I believe. And in 99, I hadn't been to Bayanulgi, though we'd sent clients of ours. And so I traveled there, and I've again been studying Mongolia my whole life. Sure. The eagle hunters. So the Kazakhs who live in Western Mongolia, the westernmost province, Bayanulgi, the one that's at the border, at the confluence of four countries, China, Russia, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan. They've lived there for over 2 centuries. In the 1800s, they migrated into Mongolia. And, they hunt with golden eagles. Now, falconry is widespread throughout the world, Scotland to Saudi Arabia, and we hear about that. But hunting with golden eagles is something that's quite rare as far as being a part of the culture and the traditional art. So during the communist purges, etc., these Kazakhs, their tradition survived in Mongolia. But in Kazakhstan, it was literally almost abolished. Just like in Mongolia, they were destroying mosques, and because obviously the atheist philosophy of communism didn't allow for any national identity, or even Genghis Khan or Genghis, as you know him, was not even, his image was prohibited, and so the national identity was something that was suppressed and actually outlawed in many cases, as opposed to the state, the communist philosophy.
That was the only culture.
But the Kazakhs, it survived. It disappeared in Kazakhstan. It survived in Bayanolgi province. But when I got there, I met only a few families there, and I asked the elders that I was with there. I mean, I spent several days there, and we got snowed in. It was a great experience.
Cool.
But so one evening, with several vodkas and conversation with a couple of our local outfitter, excuse me, because I traveled and I met only 3 or 4 families with eagles. And I finally stumbled across a few. We drove all through the province area and the valley there, especially the concentration around the provincial center. But, excuse me, so after meeting them, we had to sit down and we got snowed in. And so I spoke to them about this. And they told me they thought there was probably only 20 or 30 families left. And they didn't hunt with them anymore. In the past, they used to use them for hunting for furs and trade. The fur trade was more lucrative. But most of them, rely on herding and pastoral, raising livestock as their main. But so it was diminishing, obviously. And so I came up with the idea after several cocktails with my colleagues there.
As most
of course,
things inspire.
And so we came up with the
from.
Well, they can come up with some bad ideas with that.
That's true. Very true. Fair point.
Elements. But this one was a great idea because its intent was to help preserve this tradition and this culture. Right. So the idea of a festival, and of course, remember, I was asked to promote travel in 1990 by the Prime Minister, first Democratic Prime Minister. And this was not done for travel, but I told him, unlike some of the other festivals that occur in Mongolia where the dates get changed, that if you're trying to promote travel, you want to create a fixed date. And so we agreed that we should have a festival where they compete amongst each other for who's trained the eagle. That's not a hunting experiment, not an exhibition of hunting skills, which I've battled for years. This would have been this October will be our 21st anniversary of this festival. Last year was the 20th, and I was there for that. And founder and funder have only one letter difference. I tell people, you take the O out. If you're the founder, you take out the O and you're the funder. So we've been helping to fund this festival for 20 plus years, every year consistently. But it didn't evolve the way I wanted, because the number of there's a great movie, The Eagle Huntress, and I have a 3-second starring role in it. I'm kidding. It's the story of Ashilpan, the 13-year-old girl.
You have an IMDb page.
not even, but so Ashilpan, this young 13-year-old girl, first young woman to compete in the festival in 2015 against. By that time, it had grown. We had 70 or 80 competitors in the festival where we test their training skills, and it's always in the same valley right in front of this mountain, right outside the provincial center. And you release the eagle from about 300 yards away from the side of this mountain, well up this mountain. And then the owner trainer is on horseback in this arena kind of marked out by stones with these divisions. It's about the size of a football field and a half or 2 football fields. And they're on horseback and they ride across these lines to see. And if they're in the center area and the eagle comes by that time, it will return to them from 300 meters away. So this 13-year-old girl, the first female to enter it, won. And, we know how many there are Muslim societies and culture that just treat women so poorly, and it's horrific. And here to see her, grown men crying because 5.3 seconds, I believe it was, that from 300 meters, that eagle came and landed on her arm. It was one of the youngest eagles. And her father, he's trained, he has 2 daughters and 2 sons. He's trained them all the same way about training the hatchlings. And, by the ancient tradition, most of them still comply with it. It's something we should help to reinforce. They release them back to the wild when they're 6 to 8 years old. And their hunting instincts are still preserved. And now they don't do it for fur trade. And so I used to battle. They would tie a wolf cub or something and have 5 eagles attack in the middle of the arena. And so it was not part of our program. But there's been some controversy, people saying that this was done for tourism. It was done to preserve a cultural tradition that is
Right.
vanishing. And we've done it. The estimate now is 300 to 400 hunters. But of course, I'm a conservationist and I'm committed to that. So this year, I'm really proud that there's a wonderful Mongolian biologist, and I'm also now a board member of the Peregrine Fund, a famous nonprofit conservation organization that helps save the peregrine falcon and is doing work internationally, helping protect raptors all over. It's a wonderful conservation organization. And so a biologist who got his master's degree with their sponsorship in Boise, Idaho, I believe, where they're based, again, over 20 some odd years ago, his name is Nyambayev. He runs the Wildlife Science Conservation Committee or organization, nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And so WSCC, we are donating to fund a census of eagles, and it's a 5-year study that will go on. And the Peregrine Fund is also supporting this with their scientific input and their knowledge and oversight. So, and he's a wonderful biologist committed to everything from fish population monitoring to, so we'll do this, start with a census of the eagles, because we don't, while we're saving a cultural tradition, we certainly don't want to endanger the numbers of eagles. But in its very essence, it's tradition in its own structure releases the eagles back to the wild, which is much different than many other
completely different in other parts of the world that have cultural and wildlife tourism. Right. So
but what we need to do is really have a good look, and we're proud to help fund this, and we are the sole funders at this point, but we're looking for more support on that, because it's a 5-year study, because once you do a census, you have to repeat the census to see what your impact is. Sure. But also we want to educate the local hunters on their practices. And the festival itself, as I said, I started these with some three local Kazakhs who were outfitters in tourism, which was limited amount in the 90s.
Of course.
But they didn't grasp the transparency that's required to run a because we started by starting the Golden Eagle Hunters Association. There's a beautiful little museum that's got very little funding to support that. But I've got to be quite frank that it didn't go that way, the appropriation funds, and also the ticket revenue grew to at its peak. We had well over 1,000 visitors come. But 1,000 visitors for this festival is minuscule compared to some of the festivals we see in other parts, including Naadam, the national holiday.
Right,
so it's grown to become the second most popular festival in the country by word of mouth. And of course, the movie The Eagle Huntress has helped that. But we have to make sure that the impact is proper. But we should also use the nonprofit association, the Eagle Hunters Association, to help ensure that they do the best practices. And we can by tagging. And by the way, we are tagging, and we're also going to use transmitters to establish the migratory patterns of the golden eagle, because in their range. So it's a wonderful project, and it's a combination of scientific research to really identify the impact of the festival. If the festival has a negative impact on the golden eagle population, then you know what? It's time to rethink the festival.
Sure.
But the cultural preservation is the key. That's what we started for. We certainly have to be responsible if that cultural preservation has a negative impact on the wildlife population and the treatment of the eagles. So
I agree completely. And what would it look like from a client perspective? Like, is the festival for 1 day? Is it 2 days? What are the accommodations like?
It's a 2-day festival, and they have competition, and they also have other things that I think it's better if we have a 3-day festival. And for a client, it's amazing, because the hunters come in from all of the 21 sumas or townships within the province.
Sure.
And some of them come over 200 kilometers on horseback with their eagles.
Oh my gosh.
And so you see this confluence of, last year we had, and the 20th anniversary, we had about 128 or 29 participants.
Oh my God.
So it's obviously grown.
Golden eagles are massive. I mean, it's
golden
not like
eagles are one of the largest
falconry.
eagles.
This is nothing compared to it. I mean, it's like at least 3-4 times the size. Super fast.
Well, a golden eagle can reach as much as 14, 15 pounds, and its wingspan is up to 7 feet.
7 feet? Oh my God.
The golden eagle, bald eagle, these are some of the largest species of eagles in the world.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's crazy.
We as one of the things also our clients, they have to know, going to a place like Mongolia, whether it be the nomadic culture, which is unique, and the level of hospitality, or the environment. I mean, obviously we haven't talked about Three Camels, and I guess you'll lead me
That'll be
into
next.
it, but it comes
for
up.
Sure.
But whatever we do there, look, that culture, everyone wants to progress in life, and they're not there for our viewing pleasure. We should be benign visitors, environmentally, culturally. They're not there just for our viewing pleasure. So we shouldn't be there as a catalyst to change them, nor should we be there in any way to retard their growth or their progress. We have to be benign visitors. And if we can share things with them, and it's an interaction, it's an authentic interaction, it's what we promote. We don't say, hey, here's this family we visit, it's the same family.
Sure.
The level of hospitality in Mongolia, the nomadic way of life, is such that you can say, we're going through lunch, we always carry rice or fruit and things with us, because that's the way the exchange. And we ask our clients to bring pictures of home and their family, their pets.
Oh, cool.
Because that's the kind of exchange when they show, and when these people are sharing their house, because you'll never be turned away from a meal or food or water or shelter or a meal by a Mongolian nomadic family. To this day in the countryside, when they go off to tender herds, and it's all free range and it's organic, and since it's free range,
it's always been organic and free range since the beginning of time.
And then we'll talk about what the grazing is like in the Gobi Desert. But so when they go out to collect their herds or do their own inventory or have to collect their herds to move, they travel sometimes 10 or 15 kilometers to collect all their livestock. But to this day in the countryside, when they leave their home, they'll leave the door of their ger, their yurt, unlocked, and prepare a meal and leave it on the table in case someone's hungry and they're not there. That doesn't happen.
That is such a beautiful tradition
in New Jersey. So this level of hospitality permeates society. Yeah. So this level of hospitality permeates society because every Mongolian, even in the capital of 1.6 million, everyone grew up spending summers. They have relatives in the countryside. That's who supplies them their meat. But they spent their summers there and know about this level of hospitality. So this kind of welcoming feeling. And also, they live in some of the Mongolia, the temperature, yes, the summers are beautiful. It doesn't get nearly as hot or humid. It's quite dry. But, last year was one of the first years over 100 degrees at some points of the summer. But usually it's 80, 90, and it's a dry heat. But in the winters, it can be quite cold. It can
quite chilly and windy.
Can get up to minus 50, or down to as cold as minus 50.
Well,
so these people live in this environment.
Quick, can I just interject really quick? We've talked about what is the best time of year?
Look, the national holiday in Adam is in July 11th, 12th, 13th are the traditional days. And of course, that has a draw because they have a huge opening ceremonies in the capital and the stadium. And then they have the horse race outside.
Right.
Island, not the national holiday, is celebrated in every province. So I love a countryside Naadam. And Naadam is a term that means games or celebration. Even in the old days, and to this day, you'll see a herder will celebrate the wedding of his daughter, or a monk will pick a holy day in a holy place, and they'll host a Naadam where they offer an invite. So when you go to the countryside Naadam, kids come on horseback from neighboring provinces, and they'll do the horse race. So they compete in the three quote unquote manly sports: horse racing, wrestling, and archery. Okay. And so to see this done in the countryside is really a genuine, unique experience. And yes, the stadium and the capital, the opening ceremonies are beautiful. The prime minister, presidents are there, and the politicians. And it's an amazing, it's like the Olympic opening for them every year. But when you go to the countryside, there's this level of authenticity, and you're out there with these people. It's just amazing. So you can experience that. So that's in the middle of the summer, which is the warmest time. But the spring in Mongolia, in the Gobi Desert, for example, it's energy center, considered by many Shambhala. Spring flowers, these beautiful valleys. I mean, in the Gobi, when we talked about the other three major ecosystems and areas, but the Gobi has been considered a mystical energy center by many for many, many centuries, actually. And to this day, I'm a kind of a type A because of my background in construction.
Sure.
And
makes sense.
Living where I live. But there is, I don't sleep anywhere more peacefully than I do in the Gobi. And it does give you a different level of energy. But to be out in this vast, vast horizons in this beautiful desert. I mean, we have a valley there very close to our lives, less than an hour away. In the winter, the ice will build up almost 100 feet high.
Yeah.
When you come back, sometimes it takes until July to melt. So you can walk on a frozen river in June when it's 80 degrees out with a T-shirt and shorts on and walk on ice. we have to tell people not to walk on them, but if they do, they put clamp-ons on because, it can be dangerous on this massive level of ice that's melting. It becomes quite slippery. But imagine you go into this huge valley and it's 80 degrees out in the desert in the summer, and you see this ice,
ice wall, yeah,
formed by the stream that carved this valley to begin with. But the dunes at night and the stars in the skies, it's the combination of this with the level of hospitality, and our staff is tremendous. We've been a model of empowerment. And I've gotten into the lodge without the formal invite.
We're going to get into the lodge. I mean, the Gobi is such a catchment area, and you said this energy center, valleys, cliffs, dunes, snow leopards, nomadic culture. Obviously, this place speaks to so many people. Tell us how you got the idea for Three Camel Lodge, what it is, and tell me a little bit about its commitment to sustainable practices.
Well, obviously the commitment started with Nomadic Expeditions. We didn't build Three Camel Lodge until a decade after Nomadic Expeditions was conducting expeditions to Mongolia.
Okay.
Had already achieved some notoriety. But, as a carpenter and Mongolian, born and raised in America, I remember reading a book. I read a book by a famous author of Mongolia named Chultan. He wrote a series of 5 books on jewelry, culture, and one was architecture. So he described the different types of architecture. Some of it similar to Tibetan architecture, flat roofed, with the pole ceiling beams, and also the famous hip roof, the temple style, and the mortise and tenon. So I always dreamed of how do you build this with no nails?
Sure.
We have in the West, in the carpentry, I've done building and framing buildings, apartments, homes. We use plenty of nails and screws and things like that. But so it was 10 years later, and I really tried very hard and we've been very successful. We started the first private guide training school in Mongolia in the early 90s, training 20 to 40 guides a year with Academy of Sciences, professors, historians, biologists, paleontologists, astrophysicists, telling them about constellation. And we can only hire 3 or 4 guides a year. And so we're helping build capacity to give a higher level. You can use the term luxury if you want, but about content and experience, really truly experiential with great content and history. And so these guides go on to help raise the bar for all of Mongolia. And I'm really proud of that.
That's awesome.
Guides who have taken our courses. And we have so our company's run by Mongolians. Even our office, our president, Undra Buyanemik, is Mongolian national. Got her master's degree in international relations in Cal State Sacramento, and spent her summers going out to help back to Mongolia every summer, helping her grandmother, her sheep and goats.
That's amazing.
I think her grandmother was almost 70 before they finally convinced her to move back to the capital for medical care and other things. But she still has cousins out there who are out there living with their livestock and their herds, and so you don't find candidates like that. But she's an amazing lady, and she's typical of what some of the great people we have in our company. And we have a chef who cooks. She can make fresh ricotta cheese or mozzarella. And she's come to the U.S. And they're all Mongolians.
So I
believe
can
that
have
no one's
fresh
better
ricotta
qualified.
cheese in the Gobi Desert, of all places. Wow.
It depends. We don't keep it but she can make it. She makes it fresh there.
Oh,
but, we have, but she can cook traditional Mongolian. We have dumpling making kinds of the national dish. But she also has Western. We have an organic greenhouse. And so the Three Camel Lodge evolved because after a decade of using other lodges and yurt camps in the country, the level of service and also just term luxury, but having ensuite attached showers.
Subjective.
I'm proud that our lodge is built by LEED's sustainable standards. It qualifies to be LEED's Platinum, but I don't believe in paying for the subscriptions to be, certified by these. I know what practices we have. We didn't cut any Mongolian trees. We have, we quarried the stone for all of the stonework you see in the showers and the patios, and it's all quarried by hand from 26 kilometers away. It's all Mongolian carpenters making our furniture there. It's a great experience. We have a spa that's being finalized now. We always had geras that were for massage treatment and acupuncture and cupping and various traditional medical applications and treatments. But now we have a spa we're building underneath where we have, our main lodge building. Cool. And so that's where we're offering the same kinds of services. But again, it's just an amazing base. We have our own stables because the Mongolian ponies, if they spend all winter out there and grazing, they can be a little bit feral when you're trying to. So
I could
imagine. Horses are socialized, they're well trained, they're great for us. So we built stables. We're also sponsoring a wonderful project where we're raising the quote unquote the Mongolian Mastiff, a purebred, because I supported the Mongolian Bunker Project. It was a combination of Western scientific approach with the Mongolian ancient Mongolian breed, which is whether it's a descendant or the Tibetan Mastiff is a descendant of the Mongolian is still
subject of a bit 100% controversy.
But they're the same species genetically. So ours is a purebred dog that was given to me as a gift because we supported that project. And so we decided that what's amazing, and this has been done in other countries as well. So we're breeding Barbus, our dog.
Cool.
We have a partner this year.
Right on.
And we've built new kennels for that because the puppies will be raised with baby goats and sheep as well when they're from puppies on. So they become socialized with animals and protecting them. And to this day, they do that, the Mongolian herding dogs. But these dogs will specifically know we won't crossbreed them. They will be distributed to different herders in different regions of the Gobi where there are snow leopard and wolf populations. Because if they attack, those dogs will repel any potential attackers.
Yeah.
And even if the snow leopard is officially protected, if you're a herder and you're losing baby goats and sheep to a snow leopard, you will hunt it to protect your livelihood.
That's the fundamental foundation of the human-wildlife conflict, for sure.
So by breeding this purebred herding dog, the Bunker, it's famous. We call it the four-eyed dog because of the blonde eyebrows, which is actually, biologists know now that the Mongolian Mastiff, amongst other breeds like the Afghan Hound, 4 or 5 major species of dog are the ancestors or predecessors to most of the domesticated dog breeds that we know.
Okay.
You look at a Rottweiler, you'll see the blonde eyebrows, the skeletal structure. And so, but by giving these dogs, we're in turn helping the herding families, and we're also protecting endangered species. So it's a wonderful project. So people get to visit and see Barbus and his puppies and our
everybody likes dogs. Well, myself very much included.
He's pretty amazing. If you go on our Instagram and our Facebook, you'll see Barbus.
We'll share some photos for sure on the video.
So as I was saying, I built the lodge because of the level of service, and I also wanted to build something where we had a commitment to the ancient architecture and the cultural traditions of Mongolia. So that's what the decor, the atmosphere is, with blending the modern conveniences. I grew up with an outhouse in New Jersey. I am fond of indoor plumbing, I can say at my age. but I'm still quite happy at any one of our camps we do our individual setups, and we can rebuild Gav's one of the most versatile architectural structures in the world in the most remote, beautiful regions. We just did one with the Mongolian national. She and her husband did a kind of a honeymoon trip off to that western province, and we built them a temporary camp with attached showers and bath, where the tallest mountain ranges in Mongolia, cool. where the convergence of the 4 countries is. So there's so much to talk about, but the 3 Camel Lodge was never built to compete with Mongolians, Justin. I think it's a point I want to make. It was built to help Mongolia compete with Africa. That was my mission from the beginning.
Right, that makes sense.
We have countries that get hundreds of millions of visitors, or 100 million plus. Mongolia still, at its peak, they say it gets 400,000 or 500,000. And many of those are workers from China and other with tourist visas and working there in the construction mining boom. So, mining is a major part of Mongolia's income and its dependence on that gold. The largest gold mine in the world, gold and copper concentrate mine in the world is in Mongolia, Oyu-Tolgoi. And but I believe that we can share the treasures that are on top of the earth with Mongolia without having to just rely on the ones that are dug, that we have to dig out of the earth. And so mining is a necessary industry, but I think best practices is important.
Absolutely,
so the 3 Camel Lodge is old. Every light bulb at the 3 Camel Lodge is LED and photovoltaic. So we have a solar grid there. And we also, we've given up, we have no single-use plastic. There is no plastic straws there. We don't have, every guest receives a stainless steel bottle, and we have watering stations there where we have purified water. And by the way, our pH in our Gobi water, but visitors don't trust water in many places, even in the U.S. A lot of people don't trust their tap water, and probably justifiably. But so we have this filtered water, Gobi water that's filtered there, and in these large watering stations.
It's kind of a reverse osmosis sort of a process.
Well, where they much more scientific in where we get it from the local provincial center where there's a water facility there that creates purified water for our guests.
So, Jalsa, for what I understand, guests typically spend about 3 to 4 nights at Three Camel Lodge exploring the Gobi. Can you tell me a little bit about the signature experiences that guests have at Three Camel Lodge during a stay?
Well, the lodge itself, I think I told you, because of the things we've done there and the way it's been built, is an experience. It's a great place to unwind, but it's also really a base camp for us to go out and explore all the different wonders of the Gobi Desert. You know, it's a place where you come and I mentioned this beautiful valley, the Palantir, the sand dunes, and then outings from there. I mean, going through this rock canyon where 2 of our clients 3 years ago saw a snow leopard drinking from a spring. I mean, to go to the longest stretch of sand dunes where you can it's called the Singing Sand Dunes, Hongri-Nels. They're also about 600 or 700 feet high, and they're called the Singing Sand Dunes because if you slide down, you'll hear this whistling, and you hear the whistling even without sliding down. But as far as sand surfing goes, we do these kinds of outings there. And we'll do a remote camp there. But the Gobi has just got so many beautiful places to see. There's a surreal collection of smaller dunes called multicels where there's green pasture lands right next to these formations of sand dunes. And of course, we're the Three Camel Lodge, so we've got much more than 3 camels available to us. and you know, horses, Mongolia's got 3 million people and about 6 million horses. So there's horse riding. And it's just a wonderful environment for a place to relax and unwind, but also for children. I mean, you know, baby goat yoga. We have a yoga platform. We have this beautiful rock formation. It's an ancient volcanic rock formation.
Wow.
It's becoming popular in the West, but you know, Mongolia is the 2nd largest producer of cashmere in the world. The number 1 is Inner Mongolia, which used to be Mongolia as well.
Sure.
But technically it's China. So Mongolian goats are the number 1 producers of cashmere in the world. So if you come, not only adults or children, your kids will see where milk comes from. They can actually help milk everything from goats and sheep to horses.
Cool.
The national drink is fermented mare's milk, which it takes an acquired taste, I'll tell you.
I'm sure.
It has like about a 6 to 8% alcohol kick once it ferments.
Oh, my God.
But you know, kombucha or whatever, the different fermented or probiotic drinks, this is the original probiotic.
The real thing.
And you know, in the Gobi is also, as I told you, it's a rolling grasslands, and so the major forms of feed very popular are 3 types of onion. One is called hummus. Actually, it's a blend between onion and garlic, and then there's tan and there's mangur. So you have a bulb onion, a scallion-like onion, and this blend of onion and garlic. So we kid around and say all of our meat is obviously organic and free range, but it's also pre-marinated. But that's if you're meat. But we also offer vegetarian. We have our own organic greenhouse, as I said, that's grown by Mongolians. But we have everything from Swiss chard to broccoli. And our chef makes the best broccoli soup in the world. It's amazing. Pumpkins. But, you know, kids, it's a wonderful experience for kids. Also interacting with Mongolian children.
That would be amazing for kids.
Literally, we will show you how not only will they learn where milk comes from, they'll learn where cashmere sweaters come from. So we'll show your kids how to comb and also to weave cashmere fiber in the wool
My daughter would love
into
that.
threads. Oh, and then paleontology has another allure, obviously, for
dinosaurs, of course,
for children to the children in us. And so, you know, it's the Gobi is an amazing place, and it's so vast. And we're on the edge in the border. We're contiguous with the largest national park, which is the Great Gobi National Park.
Yeah.
We have the Three Beauty mountain range. The Three Beauties, Gorvinshachen, is the end of the Altai mountain chain, this largest mountain chain in Mongolia, and it stretches into Russia, and it stretches across and tapers off. So you can see the Three Beauties in beautiful valleys. We go on outings. So overland trips, it's amazing. But, you know, the Gobi is a wonderful place.
It sounds fantastic. And for sure it's on it. If people haven't, I'm sure everybody might have heard about the Gobi in a textbook, but not really known about the experiences. So I'm really, really excited about us to just blow the lid off the Gobi to listeners. Now, we've talked about culture. We've talked about wildlife. We've talked about festivals. What other kinds of interests can you cater to in Mongolia?
Well, you know, I told you my mission was in 1990 when they had less than 100 U.S. visitors. So basically, we didn't want to turn anyone away, and still they have less than, you know, they have 400,000 visitors a year. So historically, we've done everything from first descents of 3 whitewater rivers in Mongolia,
Oh, cool.
to hard rock climbing, you name it. It's, I started the first business council for Mongolia in the West. It was called the North American Mongolia Business Council. And, every year we had a prime minister's round table. And one meeting, it was a customary annual meeting, and the prime minister, whoever the prime minister was at the time, would introduce I chaired the board for 6 years. I founded this council, co-founded it. And I remember one year when I was just chatting with the prime minister before he introduced his cabinet, I told him that we actually had I think we had something like 42 different kinds of water-going vessels. We had full boat kayaks, these folding kayaks, and we had soar inflatable self-bailing canoes.
Duckies.
And so he surprised me when he introduced his cabinet. He introduced his Minister of Defense, his Minister of Environment, and he introduced me as the chairman of the Business Council and the Admiral of the Mongolian Navy. Obviously, Mongolia's landlocked, doesn't have an ocean, but yes, we've done some great things, and it has because of its range and ecosystems and different experience from mountains and clear lakes and rivers. I mean, some of the most beautiful rivers. I've had a couple of friends who were travel agents who came, and they wanted to go fishing, and we took them to this valley. It's one of the river valleys that feeds the lake and also flows onward to Baikal. But these 2 ladies, and they had been to over 80 countries each, and they contacted me when they were back in the capital. I was in the Gobi, I was in the capital, and they were in the Gobi, and they said that they were in this valley I knew of that was and they said it was the most beautiful valley they'd ever seen. So those are the things that are there for exploring, and overland trips are just amazing. So, and trekking, the Altai Mountains in the west and central Mongolia. Now, trekking, the ancient capital of Mongolia and Genghis Khan's capital is called Khartoum. And it's this wonderful region with these rolling mountaintops. And our satellite camp is built at the site of a meditation center, the abbot of the Edmunds Monastery, which is built right where the ancient capital was in the 13th century, has this meditation center on top of it. Just like one tiny little room that has a lawn chair on the flat roof with an umbrella tied to it, where he'll spend weeks meditating in the summer months. And even in the winter, he goes there. So he took me to this mountaintop, which overlooks, it's about 1,000 feet above the Orkhon River Valley, this beautiful river that flows below, which is now an official UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ancient Hunu and pre-Hunu Scythian art has been found there. There are 2 museums down there. But these rolling hills are just amazing trekking sites. And in the West, we have trekking guides. Our 2 guide managers are just expert trekking guides. So it's just wonderful. We'll set up interval camps if they're overnight treks. It's wonderful. And as I said, we've done first ascents. We've done motorcycle trips for people who are motorcycle
trips. Yes,
we actually have a kind of a small collection of sidecar motorcycles, including a vintage BMW at the lodge, a 1941 BMW sidecar motorcycle.
That's awesome.
Family experiences are tremendous. The term adventure, we satisfy all kinds of adventures, but for children and families together to have this kind of knowledge you gain together and interaction. Like I said, learning how to comb a cashmere goat, baby goats. Look, if you ever had a puppy or a kitten, Mongolian kids, herders' kids will adopt little baby goats. And if you think a puppy is soft or a kitten is soft, a baby cashmere goat makes them feel like sandpaper. So that's why this baby goat yoga has become so popular. And so we have this beautiful rock outcropping where it's a 360-degree view of the desert and the mountain range in the back, but for sunrise and sunset. So, sundowners, this gives you a whole different definition of sundowners. And when you have our bartender from the 3 Camel Lodge do this at sundowners, make you a cocktail, he's unbelievable. I mean,
I would imagine that those sundowners, Mongolian sundowners, with you guys, rivals, if not exceeds anything beyond Africa's wildest dreams, man.
As I told you, I built 3 Camel Lodge 10 years after Nomadic to help Mongolia have a place to compete with Africa, not to compete with Mongolians. So as an end result, the bar has become quite well known. It's gotten written up. We have, I think, close to or slightly over 100 different types of whiskey at the bar, from Japanese whiskeys to single malt scotches to Pappy Van Winkle's bourbon to you name it. And we've got a pretty good wine collection for
you. You can cater to the best of them, for sure.
That's always been the look. I grew up very, monetarily poor neighborhood in America, but I was rich in all the other things that do enrich our lives. And those are the things that, besides the physical things that we can do to make people comfortable and the level of service. Look, you've got these genuine, authentic getters with Mongolian crafted furniture by hand. Our carpenter works, and you'll see the furniture with its own sculpture and carvings. But, when you have a cashmere or camel hair blanket that's made in Mongolia, it's, cashmere blankets are, one up on us and just a sweater, but
just a bit, for sure.
But it is the unique combination. So Hut Horn is an amazing site to be on top of this mountain with a 360-degree view of other mountains. When you come out in the morning, you have a delicious cup of filtered coffee, and you look at the sunrise and sunset and look down on this beautiful river that's been there for centuries. This was the crossroads. People talk about silk routes and tea routes. The tea route or the Silk Road, there were thousands of silk routes and tea routes that were sources of trade. And what's amazing is you go to the Gobi where we tread lightly, you use the same path. So depending on what type of environment you're in a desert where you've got an existing roadway, we try to drive on that same roadway. Mm-hmm. But these are the same. I got a flat tire from a 200-year-old camel cart nail in my Russian Jeep in the early 90s. So these are the same because they're the point A to point B. So these are the same routes that Genghis Khan used and many Mongols before him. Ancient petroglyph sites where rock carvings from, thousands of years ago, almost Bronze Age. It's incredible. So adventure is there for you. Horse trekking. I've done 90-day horse treks in the Northwest province of Mongolia. So, we've had clients who spent 90 days on horseback with us.
90 days on horseback.
90 days. Yes.
The name of the show is Smart Aspirations. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. After 90 days on a horse rack, my ass would be on fire.
It's smart and maybe sore.
Smart and sore. Sore aspirations. We could do that. Sore aspirations. I like that.
but that's obviously, those are unique. We've done, as I told you, 2 clients tracking snow leopards, right? But we've had another client of ours who spent 30 days and produced a movie about it in searching leopard, following leopard tracks. And he actually did a documentary called Leopard in the Land. A good friend of my dear friend named Joe Rohde, who's actually an executive at Walt Disney. He used to be, he still is in charge of the Imagineers. So his card used to say creativity. Yeah. And so he spent 30 days on horseback tracking snow leopards in the western part of Mongolia. So we had a camel. He was on horseback with a camel, packed camels with him, and we set up tented camps for him. So we can appeal to all this. But I love when children come to the Gobi and we fly kites in the Gobi and they learn how to milk animals, and they also meet Mongolian children. To have a sunset dinner at this famous Flaming Cliffs I told you about, and have the only Mongolian school of cultural performances and musical instruments and dance in a countryside school. It was formed by a husband and wife team. So we've been a sponsor and we've supported them. We sent, for the last decade plus, we sent the whole school to the International Children's Music Festival in Ankara, Turkey. 2 years ago.
Beautiful, man.
So these are kids, some of them never leave the Gobi. These are herders' children. And this is the only cultural school that they do their regular studies and study ancient traditional dance and music. And so they perform
and
for
the
our
guests
clients
can
in the summer months.
That. Wow.
Oh, look,
tearjerker.
The content, it's guiding to a level there. As I told you, we work very closely with the Academy of Sciences and experts in whatever interests that people have. But also the level of service, I've got to tell you, is just, I'm really proud that the Lodge was picked in Condé Nast Reader's Choice, not this past October, but the October before. And it's not something you apply for, but 460,000 plus readers. They picked the 20 best hotels in Europe, North America, different regions. And over 460,000 readers selected the 3 Camel Lodges as the 10th best hotel in Asia. I didn't even know we were a hotel.
And you've got some stiff competition there. I mean, I'm not going to
Yeah,
drop names, but you've got some real stiff competition. That's an honor.
I was quite
for
quite proud, and it's all run by Mongolians, so it's a genuine, authentic
Perfect.
experience for from young to old, and it's great. So, the adventure of learning is always a great one, and then to be able to do it in wide open spaces. We have a saying in Mongolia: only in wide open spaces do you truly have vision.
I love that. I love that.
So it's just one of those things that look, it's hard to describe. I try to tell people. So you've got this unbelievable expansive territory with diverse physical, natural history aspects, mountains, beautiful lakes and rivers you can drink out of, the eagle hunters in the highest mountains in the West, grasslands that are endless, and then this mystical desert, this truly mystical desert. And so, yes, we couldn't turn people away from Mongolia in my history there. We can do it all, and we've perfected doing everything. We try to continue to improve. There's no such thing as being finished,
Well, we're going to help spread the word for sure. Listen, we're almost out of time, but in closing, for those considering a trip to Mongolia, do you have any parting comments?
I'll tell you, I'll share two famous sayings in toast. We have a saying, "Neg hersin meng songsnasil dere." It's better to see it once than hear of it 1,000 times. So that's what I say about Mongolia. But when I was a young boy growing up, and my father was the one who passed away when I was 14, who ensured and forced me to speak Mongolian when there were so few people speaking Mongolian in the U.S. He used to say to me, "Get to battle Mongolia," which means when you're in the house, you speak Mongolian because the blonde-haired, blue-eyed ones with the other religion will teach you English. So he was, but he spoke 4 languages, never had a formal education, couldn't read or write, but never really, I was his English translator, but he knew that I would assimilate and learn English, maintaining my language, which many decades after he passed away, I was speaking to these members of parliament in Mongolian after 400 years in Russia and 50 years plus in America. So his infinite wisdom about preserving our culture and our identity, and then now sharing it with people, it's amazing. But another great thing, he would be invited. He was such a great storyteller. He would be invited to weddings and things in our local community. And I remember hearing this toast, and I didn't hear it again. I started crying when I heard it again in Mongolian. And the toast is, "Avem the battle ong hintaten, the battle ong gazarhen," which means, while your father is alive, make as many friends as you can, and while your horse is alive, see as many lands as you can.
I love
that. To me, the beauty is this, that no parent should measure their children by wealth, fame, fortune, material goods, or things like that. But if they're well loved with real friends, that's success in life, because friendship is a powerful, powerful thing. And it's a valuable thing, much more than monetary. And your horse, whether it be a Mongolian pony or if it's a Boeing, if it takes you to many lands and many places, it makes your mind, your world, and your heart larger. So this is an ancient toast that I didn't hear again till decades after my father had passed away, and I'd heard it at the weddings that we played around with as kids while the adults were there. And it still has amazing pertinence. And I got to say that Mongolia has this allure because of Genghis Khan, the largest empire in the world, this great conqueror, which I grew up in the Western educational system hearing he was a barbarian. And,
of course, me too.
But I came to learn later, my curiosity taught me later in this great book, Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World by Jack Weatherford.
Right.
Taught us that he built more physical bridges than any other emperor in the world, never enslaved women or children, practiced freedom of religion because he worshipped the heaven and the skies. So he also provided safe passage for any emissaries and diplomats.
Never enslaved
and so
anyone.
You don't conquer the largest empire in the world and just can be categorized as just being a barbarian.
Sure.
Certainly, I'm not saying there were not any martial deeds and acts, and certainly there was warfare, but what he also did was practice some things to create. And the Mongol Empire, at its core strength before it dissipated, lasted 300 years, which is a few years longer than the United States has been in existence.
Yes.
So,
yes, it is.
But yet his legacy is about the culture and and to this day, he started the first national park. And to me, conservation is essential for us. All these beautiful places we want to share with people. If we don't play an active role in preserving them for future generations, then we're really being mindless.
We'll lose.
So we have to. These are the treasures that we didn't create, but we certainly show that we can destroy them. So we have to make an effort to conserve them. And that's why I think another experience you'll have, whether it's with nomadic expeditions or at the 3 Camp Lodge, wherever we go, you'll see what our commitment to conservation is. And certainly we welcome people to be involved in those programs. But Mongolia has that combination of wide open spaces, this cultural experience, throat singing, the ancient art of singing almost with 2 voices. There are different schools of it, where they vibrate the larynx and the diaphragm, where it sounds like they're singing in deep wavering of the vocal cords.
It's one of the wildest things you will ever hear in your life. It is
the ancient art of contortion.
Beautiful.
It is amazing, and you can look it up. It's called Hoomi, H-O-O-M-I, or throat singing. And contortionism. The Cirque du Soleil has over 60 Mongolian contortionists. And it started with Ringling Brothers in 1991 when they brought 52 Mongolian performers to the United States. And so contortionism, young women start when they're 6 or 7 years old, and you've seen these performances on Cirque du Soleil in different places. So there's the horsehead fiddle, 2 strings made from horsehead.
Yes.
So these cultural things. But again, this wide open spaces, I told you, night skies. And look, there's adventure. There are overland trips where you can do horse trekking. You can track snow leopards or go see them. We've done that for several clients. And, whitewater rivers. Look, there's a wide range.
You can cater to anyone, and you can do it extremely well. And I just want to say real quick, you are doing, and I don't mean this in any form of insincere flattery, but I know from the bottom of my heart, you are doing your father and the country of Mongolia and your people so well. And I thank you so much for joining us today.
No, Justin, thank you. Obviously, been spending quite a bit of time in my life, and it's been a major reward for me. It's never been a source of income for me. That's not the way. It's been a source of reward and much more fulfillment than just dollars can provide for people. But it's created jobs for hundreds of kids and children and adults. And, I'm proud of that, as I am in my construction business and the great people who work with me. But there we have to, look, it's about empowerment. When a chef who was washing dishes 10 years ago is making ricotta cheese and cooking for millionaires and billionaires, and them saying, that's the most delicious meal I've had. That to me is a wonderful level of fulfillment. Or when people who've been to 100 countries plus, or Africa 20 times, and they come, they say, that was the most amazing trip I've ever had. So to me, that's the things that our people deliver. I can only be there as often as I can. I've been fortunate enough to spend up to 6 months a year. This is the longest I've been in Mongolia in quite a stretch of years. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wishing that everyone will emerge from this pandemic, and once borders are open and people are traveling again and they're safe and healthy, Mongolia is a wonderful place to come. And I love the family experience. I think families there just become stronger and they experience other families together. It's just, look, it's great. So whether it's cross country, we have electric mountain bikes, we have electric scooters. So we have all these different apparatus that are environmentally sensitive, but we have those adventures, so there's the cross country, motorcycle outings and things like that people do. But, we're here for whatever the interests are. We'll find them. And if we're not good at it, we'll find you the best people to do whatever it is you want to pursue.
Right. And if you want to go to Mongolia, you're interested, click the link below. If you like the video, give us a like. Obviously, subscribe to our channel for more content. And again, Jalsa, I can't wait to spread the word about Mongolia, my friend. Thank you so much for joining.
You're doing that. Thank you very much for having me, and wishing you all well, and we'll hope to see you in Mongolia.
All right. Take care, buddy. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Smart Aspirations. Justin Huff is the manager of Swaggy Swan Travel. For all travel-related inquiries, please visit www.swaggyswan.com. That's www.swaggyswan.com. And click inquiries. Have a stupendous day, and we'll see you next week.